Hello, everyone. Welcome to Something to Talk About Live. My name is Liz Owen. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Director of Communications at PFLAG National. It's great to have you with us for another edition of Something to Talk About Live. As always, we are here to have conversations around inclusion and diversity with our Learning and Inclusion Director, Jean Marie Nevada. Welcome, Jean Marie.
Hey, Liz Owen, how's it going?
It is going. How are you?
I'm okay. So I have a question for you. Did you go to your prom?
I did go to my prom with my gay best friend.
Of course you did. And now you work at PFLAG. It was meant to be, wasn't it?
It was inevitable.
Yeah, I didn't go to mine. I was angry being like an angry baby queer person at the time and skipped it. And so this week's show totally hit me like right in the feels.
Oh my gosh. Well, go to it and I will perhaps see you later.
Bye, Liz. Hey, everybody. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. I'm the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National. My pronouns are she and her, or ella, if you speak Spanish. And every single week we get together to talk about something related to LGBTQ plus inclusion and equality. And this week we are talking about LGBTQ seniors. And the article that we're using, you can access it if you go to straightforequality.org/discussion series. It appeared in LGBTQ Nation, and the title for it was Joyful New Documentary Senior Prom is a revolutionary portrayal of aging while queer. And it tells you about the film, but it also gets into the larger issue that we want to talk today, which is about our LGBTQ elders. And to do that, we have somebody who is perfect for this conversation. So I'd like to bring in Sherrill Wayland, who is SAGE's Director of National Education Initiatives. Hey, Sherrill.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am wonderful. It's so good to be here today, Jean Marie.
Well, I'm so glad that you were able to be here because there's no one better to talk about this topic than SAGE. So before we even get started on the questions, can you tell people who may not be familiar with SAGE what it is and what you do?
Definitely. So SAGE is the nation's oldest and largest organization dedicated specifically to advocacy and services for LGBT older adults. And we've been in operation since 1978. Our headquarters are in New York City with programs across the country. We have SAGE affiliates in 22 states today, as well as Puerto Rico. So just really excited to be here today and have this conversation with PFLAG. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And Liz is scrolling SAGE's URL, which is sageusa.org across the screen. So everybody should go check them out after the show, of course. So let's get started talking about this article. So a lot of people are really not familiar with things like an annual prom for LGBTQ plus elders. And this one happens to be hosted out of the LA LGBT Center. So Sherrill, could you tell people a little bit about events like this one? And are you seeing more events happening like this these days?
Yeah, you know, I thought about this a lot when you asked me to be on the show. And I think if you went to any community that has a large LGBT population, you would see LGBT folks hosting dances. It may be an organization-sponsored event like the prom in LA, or it may be a group of women that came together and decided, you know what, we really like to dance and we want to bring our community together to share in celebration. So, you know, I think we've seen these types of events really throughout history and, you know, continue to be really popular today.
And so you've been able to see what kind of impact these events have. Could you talk a little bit about this? Because I think that is one of the most touching things that you see, because so many people were deprived of that experience and it wasn't even by choice. I mean, there just was no alternative at the time.
Right. And, you know, even today, Jean Marie, I think, you know, for LGBT folks, we may still not feel comfortable going to, you know, a predominantly straight dance. You know, I would oftentimes hear my folks talking about, you know, they would go to their, you know, once a month dance that was, you know, held in a small community near where they lived. And I would oftentimes look at that and think, oh, I want that for me and my wife, but we don't necessarily have that opportunity. But then a group of women where I live in St. Louis, they actually started a women's dance that happened, I think, about every other month. And the largest number of folks that attended these dances were over the age of 50. So it was largely older women who, you know, had this opportunity to come together and share in community and share in celebration and, you know, just be together and really, you know, a time to express ourselves and our love in a place that we didn't have access to, in the
Yeah,
past.
and I think that feels safe. Do you think it's kind of making up for missed opportunities for a lot of people?
I think so. Missed opportunities and new opportunities, right? So, we would even have, if you were a single person, you would wear green beads to signify that you were single and looking for an opportunity to meet somebody and dance and have company and, really just sharing that experience.
I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about the larger issue at hand, which is that of LGBTQ seniors. I was reading one of the articles and it said that, by 2030, there'll be over 7 million LGBTQ people who are over 50 years old. So we are looking at a significant number of people in our community becoming older, needing different kinds of supports and services. So there was a study that was in Clinical Gerontologist, and it looked at research on LGBTQ plus elder care in long-term facilities, and the news really wasn't good. What they found was that staff tended to be undertrained. They didn't have enough information. There wasn't a lot of cultural competency and humility work. So can you tell us a little bit more about what we learned from that study and studies similar to it?
Yeah, thank you for that. That study really, I think, highlights what SAGE has often talked about and what we've always known. For many LGBTQ older adults, they continue to have concerns about where they'll go should they need long-term care supports as they age. Will they be able to stay in their community? Will they have access to a place that really welcomes them and supports them? Or will they have to recloset? And those are true concerns that, we've heard time and time again. So this study really just highlighted what we've already known. And there is, some really important work that's happening, through SAGE and with our partnership with the HRC Foundation and our new Long-Term Care Equality Index project. That's an opportunity to provide best practices for long-term care communities and to provide cultural competency training. And, it's through this work that, my hope is that one day every LGBTQ older adult will have access to welcoming long-term care supports. And not just one community, but choice. I've always said we should be able to age in our communities where we've always lived, where we've raised our families, where we've worked, and to stay here and have the same choices as our neighbors. And so that's my hope through this work is, that one day we'll have that true choice.
I love what you just said. And I think it must really resonate for people. The idea that not only are you going to change where you're living and the way you're living when you enter one of these facilities, but in some cases, we are looking at people who either have to make a radical change to who they are because they're afraid, or they need to go somewhere else. I mean, I live in Palm Springs where we actually do have senior care facilities for people who are LGBTQ. One of the statistics that I think I read in one of the articles, I wrote it down, was 34% of LGBT people and 54% of, when they looked at just trans and non-binary folks, said that they're really concerned about hiding their identities when they go into care. What are some of the experiences that you hear from people when they talk about what they're worried about?
Yeah, that just resonates over and over again. It's the statistics are true. People are very concerned. And we have seen folks that have experienced discrimination and stigma when they enter into long-term care. But we've also seen long-term care communities that have stepped up and said, we want to be welcoming. We want to provide services to you that are LGBTQ inclusive and know that you have a home here. So, it's important that we share both of those realities. And I truly believe that most long-term care communities want to serve the LGBTQ community. They just may not have had, the support needed to really develop those systems and policies and practices that really embrace true inclusivity and broader cultural awareness.
Can we talk about those things a little bit? Because I'm not sure that people who haven't had to kind of grapple with this necessarily know the scope of what we're talking about. So you mentioned policies. So can you talk a little bit about what kind of policies you're looking for and you would suggest? And I'd also love to hear a little bit about education and training, because we know that's a big part. I think you're absolutely right. Most people want to do the right thing. They just need to learn how.
Exactly.
So what do you know about that?
Yeah, so with the Long-Term Care Equality Index, we start really at the foundation. Do you have non-discrimination policies? Are they inclusive of both LGBTQ individuals, their families, and your LGBTQ employees? that's the baseline. And, if we go into a community and they don't have those basic policies in place, then that's always a pause for us to step back and say, is this a place that recognizes me? And is this a place that I can count on to be welcoming and supportive? We also look at training of staff. It's not just a one-time, hey, we did our LGBT cultural competency presentation during Pride Month and we're done. It's ongoing training and staff development. And I think it's important that organizations invest in their staff development. We want employees to feel comfortable and to have their concerns answered and addressed so that they can best serve LGBTQ older adults. So those are some of the basic, things that we provide. Again, Sage Care, our training program, does a lot of our cultural competency training. And then the Long-Term Care Quality Index is a new project. And, that program is just now taking off, and we will see it grow over the coming years, just like many of the other indexes through the HRC Foundation.
And is your hope on that one? Because I'm really fascinated by the index, because I tend to use the CEI a lot in the work that I do. Is the hope that it will have kind of that CEI effect, that it starts pushing people and it can then be used to create best practices and evolving practices too?
Definitely, yes. It's designed to roll out in phases. So the first phase is getting people to sign this commitment to caring pledge. So as a long-term care community and organization, we make a pledge to be LGBTQ inclusive. And then we start working with them on assessing where they currently are and what best practices they need to start implementing to truly be a leader in the long-term care field for serving LGBTQ older adults. We had 184 individual organizations who are now recognized as pioneers in this work. And that first report was released in the end of June of 2021. And we've already had over 100 new communities that have signed on to be a part of this. So definitely there's a desire for long-term care communities to be inclusive, and we're just really excited to see this work happening.
It's only August. You've already had over 100 people. That's phenomenal. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, that's so exciting. That is exactly when we look at these research tools and these tracking tools, I think it has so much potential to get people to move towards the right page and then get on that. So speaking broadly, if somebody who works for a facility or a facility is interested in doing more inclusive programming like the Senior Prom or things like that, do you sort of have any basics that you tell people they need to know as they get started on this work? Besides, obviously, you should totally call Sage.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And I would love to see long-term care communities as well as, senior centers and other aging providers join in this work. And, it's through, I think, recreation activities such as dancing and other types of events and gatherings where we build community and we start to break down barriers and we really see each other for who we are. And so I think there's a great opportunity for this work to happen. I would suggest that if a community is interested, that they look at who their partners could be. If you're a long-term care community who wants to, hold a dance for all people, who could your partners be? Is there an LGBTQ employee resource group that could serve as volunteers? Is there a SAGE affiliate in your community or an LGBT community center or other groups that you could partner with to do this type of work? So I think there's, just great opportunities, and it all, begins with building relationships and finding partners to make it happen.
You were just so music to my ears right now. I mean, it really is about, there are concrete steps that you can take. This isn't an abstract conversation. It never really was. And I love the fact that we can literally point to, here's where to get started. And I think partnership is such a great way. If you don't know how to do it, there's someone in your community who does.
Right.
I bet they're itching to help.
And I'm sorry, my dog may join us. I hear her barking right now. But, I also think there's this perfect opportunity for groups like long-term care communities and senior centers and others to partner with groups like SAGE and PFLAG and to offer joint programming with, older adults being the focus of how they can better support their family members who are coming out as LGBTQ. I've oftentimes said that a lot of our past PFLAG parents are now living in residential communities. So how do we bring our two communities together to really embrace LGBT inclusivity and help support the long-term care system?
And I think people really want to do it. I mean, I know that we actually have a few PFLAG chapters that meet in long-term care facilities that were started by PFLAG parents who are now entertaining the PFLAG grandparents that they live alongside, and it's phenomenal.
Right. And probably LGBTQ older adult residents who have found a safe haven through the PFLAG parents who are also residing in these communities.
That's just exciting. So, in the article, there was something in it that I found very kind of sad. And that was that one of the filmmakers said that she had never met a lesbian over the age of 50. And I started to think about my own experiences as a person who's queer. And I thought about a few years ago, I was talking to a PFLAGger who happens to be a lesbian, and she is in her 70s. And I said to her how she and her wife were a very rare role model for me. There has not been a lot of that. We are a very youth-oriented community. We don't necessarily have access or see those people who have, our elders in the community. Do you think that this is a common thing for LGBTQ youth? And what does it mean for our community?
I think not just LGBTQ youth, but all youth, and young adults. When I first started this work, I started the SAGE affiliate in St. Louis back in 2008. And when I first started talking about supports for LGBT older adults, I had people in St. Louis that said, "You mean we have LGBT elders in St. Louis?" I said, "Well, what do you think happens? We turn straight at 65, or we all move to Florida?" So I think, there's been such a focus on sexuality in our society, and sexuality in older adults is oftentimes a very taboo subject. So we don't see people, we don't see their relationships, and we don't often recognize our older adults within our communities. So yeah, I think it is an issue. But I also think today most LGBTQ youth are also growing up knowing that they have aunts, uncles, even grandparents who are LGBTQ. And so I think our youth today are finding role models in their own families, which many of us didn't have growing up. So I think that's a very powerful place to be for LGBTQ youth and for LGBT older adults, to know that we're really supporting one another within our own families. And that's very powerful.
It is. It's powerful, and it's kind of exciting too, because I think it shows, you're right, we don't just disappear when we hit a certain age bracket or go to Florida. Although if we do, it would definitely look like a Golden Girls episode. I'm positive of that.
Definitely.
We'd get it right. It would totally be Shady Pines. So if people are looking to create community, and I'm talking outside of long-term care facilities, where you might be able to bring generations together, do you have any suggestions of ways that they could do that, programs that they can look at, or suggestions, or maybe things that you've seen? Because I think part of it is just getting people in the same room, virtually speaking, of course, right now. But
yeah, definitely from a intergenerational aspect. And when I think of intergenerational, I really like to think multi-generations. It's youth, it's young adults, it's middle age, and it's older. So bringing us all together for shared opportunities and community building, I think, is really powerful. SAGE has a program called the SAGE Table, and it's an opportunity to come together for a shared meal, discussion, and community building. Of course, it's been, a lot of our SAGE tables have gone virtual, and that's still working, and it's still community building. So I would encourage folks to look at that program as an opportunity to build that sense of community across the generations.
See, this is why I'm so excited that you're here, Sherrill. SAGE does such great work, and I think people just need to start plugging into it more. I'm actually going to ask Liz if she would pop back in, because I see that we have a few questions from people, and I would love to get into some of those. We've also had some great comments, too.
We have, and Sandy raising that point that she loves the idea of PFLAG chapters meeting in long-term care facilities. And I do have to raise up our former past president, Paulette Goodman, who passed away last week, was the first person to found a PFLAG chapter in a long-term care facility. And it's still meeting to this day. And it's, exactly what you said, multiple generations of people, and a place for people to gather. Also, a sad note of, that someone, we talk about elders having to go back in the closet and how much harm that can do. And, but with the hope of, glad to hear how the landscape is making important changes so that, fewer and fewer people need to go back in the closet as they age, because mental health and behavioral health is already such a challenge for seniors that I would imagine, Sherrill, that just adds a whole other layer of stress and challenge.
Definitely. And I think, we're just now really starting to think about trauma-informed care for older adults and the intersections of trauma. And so we have to look at, all of those intersecting identities when we age, and how that impacts services and care, and where we are, as far as being comfortable being out. So, it's a really personal decision for folks as they enter into systems that, they may be reliant on.
I'm going to bring up a question. I think this is really interesting. So how young is old enough, or how old is young enough to really start making a plan? Is there a cheat sheet? How do queer elders start going about, or just near elders start making a plan for long-term care?
I think you can never be too old, and you can never be too young to start thinking about our plans for the future. I would encourage folks today to sit down and start thinking about, those decisions. As I age, who will be there to help support me? What do I want, 10, 15 years from now? SAGE has documents on our National Resource Center website, which is lgbtagingcenter.org, that shares information on future planning and things that you can start to do today to think about our futures.
Thank you for that. And then we did get a question here, actually, because it's you and Jean Marie, to talk a little bit more about the work that SAGE is doing, particular to Puerto Rico.
Yeah, so Jean Marie actually probably knows more than me, but we do have a SAGE affiliate in Puerto Rico, and they're one of our newer affiliates, and they're just doing amazing work. Jean Marie, I found out, is actually on their board of directors, so I'm going to let her do a little plug for their work in Puerto Rico.
So SAGE has been an unbelievable partner to Waves Ahead, which is a Puerto Rico-based LGBTQ plus organization. We've actually had Wilfred, the executive director, on this show before to talk about what's happening in Puerto Rico. And one of the biggest things that he talked about is the isolation of LGBTQ elders on the island, and how many of them have lived in the closet, or lived mostly in the closet, and now are very, very isolated because a lot of their community has passed away. And so the work that they are doing is very much grounded in not just the physical health piece, but a lot of the mental and spiritual health, which is absolutely key. And that is where that culturally competent and humble care really comes into play. But SAGE has been a phenomenal partner to Waves Ahead, and you can actually see the differences that are happening. The number of people showing up, the number of people accessing services, and the number of people asking for help that has really grown the program in Puerto Rico. So a big thank you to SAGE for the support that they have given to Waves Ahead in Puerto Rico.
Well, thank you for all your support, Jean Marie.
It's my pleasure. I'm just so happy that you're here, Sherrill. Liz, did we have any other questions?
I had one I would like to respond to. If that's okay.
Please.
Yeah. So I see someone spoke about knowing someone who was a trans woman who had been refused care and actually transitioned. Yes. And, that's oftentimes been a concern of mine. And I've seen, that happen as well in my work. And one of the things that we just produced through the National Resource Center on LGBT aging is an ally guide for supporting trans older adults. And it really talks about how we as cisgender and straight allies can be there and support our transgender older adults who are newly transitioning or who have also been out for a long time. So I would encourage folks to look at that as a resource that you can use in your communities.
Sherrill, can I ask you about, you mentioned COVID and that some of the programs had to go virtual because of that. What have you seen during COVID with the people that you're serving? Have people been plugging in a little bit more? I know we certainly saw a lot of people going online who might not have been super comfortable with it before. What has the effect been for you?
I think not only for SAGE, but for senior services across the country, I think it's really catapulted all of our organizations to think about hybrid models and how we've probably reached folks that we weren't traditionally reaching because they weren't able to maybe join us at a SAGE center or a senior center in their community. But to be able to come online and connect with people virtually has opened up this new world for us. And many of our LGBTQ older adults and other older adults are very plugged in. They're some of the highest users of programs such as Facebook and other social media platforms. So hopefully we'll see a continuation of hybrid programs where it's a mix of in-person and virtual.
I will say that my 80-year-old mother regularly says to me, "I can't believe you didn't see that on Facebook."
Right?
Mommy,
my mom is on there at midnight. I'm like, Mom.
You have 12 posts from your mom.
Right.
Liz, I think you said you had another question. Sorry.
I do. We do have one more question. I was just having my own mom's in an assisted living facility, and I was just having this conversation with someone about the pros and cons. Many people want to fully abolish facilities, given that nursing homes have had a real challenge and the institutionalized nature of things. So are there assets and program support for folks who would rather age at home?
So many of the SAGE programs have either a care management component where they can, help LGBTQ older adults navigate the long-term care system and look at supports, to help them age at home. And we're also really connected to our area agencies on aging, because that's really where that's where the federal government funds aging services, at a large scale. So it's really important that we connect people to those local services that can help them with, homemaker services in their home and nutrition, meal delivery services, things that can help them to stay independent in their homes.
Thank you for raising that. Like I said, that's been a bizarrely a broad topic of conversation among a group of friends of mine who all have aging parents, and what that looks like and how to plan ahead, and that not everybody wants to age in an institutionalized setting, but not everybody has the means to make that happen.
And I oftentimes say, I don't know of any of us that sit around and pick out the nursing home that we want to live in one day, right? And that's why the work that we do through cultural competency training and the LEI is so essential. And to also know that, sometimes families need that additional support because for a number of reasons, they may not be able to support their loved one at home anymore. And so going to a long-term care community may be the best option. So, these are important conversations. And like I said, it's never too late and never too early to have these conversations, but start having them.
Sherrill, we're getting close on time, but I just thought of something. I as you talked about community, do you find that SAGE is working and that you're finding yourself talking to people in faith communities too? Because so many of these organizations are faith-based, as well as people. LGBTQ people are largely people of faith. How does that play into this? Yeah, so one of our leading community long-term care systems within the new Long-Term Care Equality Index is a faith-based community. And they're United Church Homes. And, they're one of our leaders. And I really believe are really paving the way for other faith-based communities to see what's possible. And so we really encourage folks to think about that. And from a mission standpoint, serving older adults and all older adults, I think is part of the mission of most of these communities who are faith-based. That's good to hear. That really is good to hear, to recognize that this has to be a holistic approach. Well, we are unfortunately at time again. Sherrill, thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you and everybody at SAGE does. It's so important to our community. I'm so grateful for your time today. Thank you. It's been great. Have me back sometime. Totally. Next time you have something to talk about, let us know and we will be back. This was fun. And bring your dog too. Okay, very good. Next time, puppy on camera. Thank you, Liz. Well, everybody, that brings us to the end of yet another show. We will be back next week. We have a very interesting show. Once again, we are going to be talking about the film Pray Away and the ex-gay movement. So you definitely want to be here for that. We will leave you the way we leave you every single week, reminding you to run fast, laugh hard, and most of all, be kind. And if you haven't done it yet, please, 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 please go get vaccinated, and please follow directions around masks wherever you are living. Be smart so we could all be together and hug each other sometime soon. If you need any help between now and next week, you can always go to pflag.org/find to locate your chapter. And otherwise, I will see you again next Thursday on Something to Talk About Live. Bye, everybody.